The late afternoon sun bled through the slats of my living room blinds, painting tired stripes across the carpet. At 47, a Saturday spent wrestling with a temperamental lawnmower and what felt like several metric tons of mulch had left every muscle in my body singing a chorus of complaints. I was sprawled on the sofa, a half-forgotten documentary murmuring on the television, hovering in that delicious, fuzzy limbo between awake and asleep. The house was quiet, save for the distant hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the block, a sound that only emphasized my own hard-won stillness. That's when the knock came. 3 polite, firm raps on the front door. A groan escaped me, a visceral protest from my bones. I contemplated ignoring it. It was probably a delivery driver with a package for the Johnsons next door, or a neighborhood kid selling overpriced candy for a school trip. But the knock came again, a little more insistent this time. With the sigh of the profoundly inconvenienced, I heaved myself upright, my knees giving an audible pop of protest, and shuffled to the door. I didn't bother with the peephole. I just pulled the door open, the golden afternoon light framing the figure on my porch. It was Lucas Miller, my neighbor's son. He was 16, maybe 17. I was terrible with ages, all long limbs and that awkward grace teenage boys seem to cultivate. I knew him mostly in passing, a nod from the passenger seat as his mum, Sarah, backed out of their driveway, the sight of him shooting hoops alone in their driveway, the thump of bass from what I assumed was his bedroom window on summer nights. He was a polite kid, always a quiet hello if our paths crossed at the mailbox. But the Lucas on my porch that day was different. His shoulders were hunched, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a faded hoodie. His face, usually impassive, was etched with a tension that seemed too heavy for someone so young. His eyes, a clear, troubled blue, met mine and then skittered away, focusing somewhere around my left shoulder. "Mr. Carter?" he said, his voice scratchy, as if he hadn't used it in a while. "Lucas, hey, everything okay?" I asked, leaning against the door frame, still half in my cocoon of weariness. Can I talk to you for a minute?" He didn't wait for an answer, just blurted it out. "I mean, if you're not busy, it's important." The urgency in his tone cut through my residual fog. This wasn't about a borrowed tool or a stray basketball. "Sure, of course. Come on in." He stepped inside, his movements stiff. I led him to the living room, gesturing to the armchair opposite the sofa. "Can I get you some water? A soda?" "No, thank you," he said, perching on the very edge of the cushion, back ramrod straight. I sank back into my sofa, the springs creaking a familiar complaint. The documentary droned on, showing a serene school of fish. I grabbed the remote and muted it, plunging the room into a thick, waiting silence. He studied his shoes, scuffed white sneakers, as if they contained the secrets of the universe. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. I waited, forcing myself not to fill the silence with nervous chatter. Something told me he needed to find the words himself. Finally, he took a deep, shuddering breath that seemed to come from his toes. He lifted his head, and when his eyes met mine, they were bright with a sheen of unshed tears. The sight knocked the last of the sleep from my system. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice trembling. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise you won't tell my parents." "Not yet. I'm scared." A cold trickle of dread traced my spine. My mind raced through terrible possibilities. Drugs, trouble at school, legal problems. "Lucas, if you're in some kind of danger." "It's not like that," he interrupted, shaking his head. "It's about me, who I am." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I'm gay." The words hung in the quiet room, simple, seismic. They were not what I had expected, and yet, in a strange way, they were. They carried a weight I immediately understood. This wasn't a confession of a crime, it was a confession of self, and the sheer terror in his voice told me everything about the battle he was fighting. He rushed on, the words now tumbling out in a frantic river. "I've known since, middle school. I tried not to be. I prayed about it. I dated a girl from church last year, Jenny, and it just felt wrong. Like I was lying to her and to everyone. My dad, he says things. At the barbecue last 4th of July, he was talking about that football player who came out, and he said," Lucas's voice broke, and he mimicked his father's deeper, bluster-filled tone, "I just don't get it. Keep that stuff private." "What's next?" "Announcing what position you like in bed." Everyone laughed. My mum didn't say anything. She just kept making the potato salad. He wiped his eyes angrily with the sleeve of his hoodie. I hear him talking to his buddies. Words like FG and sissy. He thinks it's just guy talk. He doesn't know he's talking about me. He's planning for me to go to state, try out for the baseball team, meet a nice girl. He has this whole life mapped out for me, and I'm I'm a completely different person living inside it. The raw pain in his confession was a physical thing in my tidy living room. I saw my neighbor, Ben Miller, in my mind's eye, a good man in so many ways. A firefighter, a dedicated husband, the guy who helped you jump-start your car without being asked. He loved his family fiercely, in the way he knew how. But his world was one of clear lines, traditional values, a certain unspoken masculinity. I tried to imagine Lucas sitting at their dinner table, listening to an offhand comment, feeling a piece of his soul wither every time. Why me, Lucas? I asked softly. Not that I'm not honored you trusted me, but why come to me? He looked down at his hands, clenched in his lap. Because you're different. You live alone. You have those art books on your shelf I see through the window. You listen to that weird jazz music sometimes when you're gardening. You never joined in when the dads were all talking about manning up or whatever. You just smiled and changed the subject. And once, he paused, gathering courage. Once, a couple years ago, I was getting the mail, and you were talking to your sister on the phone on the porch. I wasn't eavesdropping, I just heard. You were telling her it was okay that her son, your nephew, wanted to do ballet. You said, the world needs more artists, and fewer critics. I never forgot that. I had a vague memory of that conversation. My nephew, Ethan, was being bullied for his interests. I'd said what I felt. It was nothing to me, a passing comment. To Lucas, hiding in plain sight, it had been a beacon. I don't know what to do, he whispered, the bravado gone, leaving just a scared kid. I feel like I'm suffocating. I have this secret that feels like it's gonna explode out of me. I'm afraid if I tell them, my dad will look at me like I'm a stranger, or worse, like I'm a disappointment, that he'll be ashamed of me. I can't stand the thought of that look on his face. The responsibility that settled onto my shoulders then was immense. This wasn't about fixing a leaky faucet. This was a human heart, entrusted to me in its most fragile state. I chose my words with more care than I had ever chosen anything. First, Lucas, I said, leaning forward, my voice low and steady. Thank you for trusting me with this. That took more courage than you probably know. I let that sit for a moment. Second, there is nothing wrong with you. Do you hear me? Nothing. Who you are attracted to is a part of you, like having brown hair or being good at math. It's not a choice, and it's not a flaw. He nodded, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. As for your parents, that's harder, I continued. You know them better than I do. Your dad, he says things from a place of not understanding. Sometimes, for people like him, the idea is scary, but the person, his own son, is different. The love he has for you is real, Lucas. I've seen it when he's cheering for you at the community games, when he's teaching you how to change the oil. That love doesn't just vanish, but it might get confused for a while. It might take him time to find his way from what he thinks he knows to who you actually are. What if he never finds his way? The question was a fearful ghost in the room. I can't promise you he will, I said, because empty promises were worse than no promises at all. But I can promise you this, you will find your way, and you will find your people. There is a whole world out there that will see you and celebrate you for exactly who you are. Your job right now isn't to fix your dad's understanding. Your job is to be true to yourself, and to keep yourself safe, emotionally and physically. That might mean waiting until you're in a position of more independence to tell them. There's no shame in that. We talked for over an hour. The stripes of sunlight crawled across the floor and faded into dusk. I shared about my own life, not with grand revelations, but with small admissions of times I'd felt like an outsider, times I'd had to redefine what strength meant for myself. I told him about supportive organizations, online communities for LGBTQ+ youth, the concept of found family. I saw some of the tension leave his shoulders. He wasn't fixed, far from it, but he was no longer drowning alone. Before he left, as he stood on my porch in the gathering twilight, he turned to me. Mr. Carter, can I come talk to you again? Sometimes? Anytime, Lucas, I said, and I meant it. My door is always open, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. He gave me a small, real smile, the first I'd seen from him that day, and nodded before walking quickly back across the lawn to his house, where the lights were just coming on in the kitchen. I watched him go, my heart a tangled knot of sorrow for his fear and awe for his bravery. The weeks that followed were painted in subtle, new colors. I saw Lucas differently. I noticed the careful way he navigated conversations with his father when we happened to be outside at the same time. I saw the weight he carried in the slope of his backpack. I became a silent ally, a safe harbor. He'd come over maybe once every week or two, sometimes just to sit and do homework in the quiet of my study, sometimes to talk about a boy at school, his fears about college applications, the relentless pressure of the facade. I also saw Ben and Sarah Miller with new, more complicated eyes. I saw Ben's claps on Lucas's back, his proud, booming voice. I saw Sarah's quiet attentiveness, the way she'd sometimes watch her son with a faint, unreadable frown, as if sensing a frequency she couldn't quite tune into. The love was there, a tangible thing, but so was the chasm of the unspoken. One evening, about 6 months after Lucas's first knock, Ben appeared at my door. He held a six-pack of beer and wore a look of casual frustration. "James, you got a sec? Need a break from the teenage tyranny upstairs? Kid's been locked in his room for days, moping." I invited him in. We sat on the back deck. He launched into a familiar diatribe about screen time, about Lucas quitting the baseball team, about how he seemed distracted and soft. "I just want him to be happy, you know," Ben said, taking a long pull from his bottle. "But he's got to toughen up. The world isn't kind." The irony was a sharp blade. I looked at my neighbor, this man who ran into burning buildings for a living, who was so profoundly blind to the quiet, daily inferno his own son was navigating. "Ben," I said, choosing a path through a minefield, "you know, happiness, it doesn't always look the way we think it will. For our kids, sometimes being tough isn't about throwing a fastball. Sometimes it's about being honest, even when it's terrifying." He squinted at me in the dim porch light. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It just means Lucas is a good kid, a really good kid, sensitive, thoughtful. Maybe he's figuring out what kind of man he wants to be, and it might not be the exact blueprint he was given. That's not rejection, Ben. That's just growth." Ben was silent for a long moment, staring into the dark yard. "You think I'm too hard on him?" "I think you love him," I said. "And love is sometimes about listening for the words that aren't being said." He didn't reply. He finished his beer, thanked me for the chat, and left. I didn't know if my words had planted a seed or simply bounced off his armor. That's the thing with being a secondary character in someone else's true story, you rarely get to see the climax. The climax, when it came, was not on my porch. It was a year later. Lucas was a high school senior, set to graduate. He'd been accepted to a university several states away, a fact Ben celebrated and Lucas viewed as his lifeline. He'd grown taller, more settled into himself. The terror in his eyes had been replaced by a determined, if anxious, resolve. He came over one final time before graduation. "I'm going to tell them," he said. "After the ceremony. I have my own bank account now. I have my dorm assignment. I have a plan if it goes badly." My throat tightened with pride and fear. "Are you sure?" "I can't go to college pretending," he said. "I need to go as myself, even if it's just by myself." I had no sage advice left. I just pulled him into a brief, tight hug, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 2 years before. "You have my number, always, no matter what." The graduation party was a big backyard affair at the Millers. I attended, ate potato salad, clapped when Lucas got his diploma. I saw him move through the crowd, smiling, but his eyes kept finding mine, seeking and giving silent reassurance. The fallout happened behind closed doors. For 2 days, their house was eerily quiet. No music, no raised voices, just a profound, aching silence. I didn't see Lucas. My phone didn't ring. On the third day, Sarah Miller came to my door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. For a wild moment, I feared the worst. "James," she said, her voice thick. "Can I come in?" We sat in the same living room. She twisted a tissue in her hands. "Lucas told us," she began, and then a sob escaped her. "He's gay, my baby. He's been carrying this weight for years, and I didn't see it. I was making potato salad." My heart broke for her, for the specific, mundane detail that haunted her. "Ben, he's not handling it well. He's angry. He feels betrayed. He thinks it's something Lucas is doing to him. They had a huge fight. Lucas is staying with a friend from the support group you told him about." She looked at me, her gaze sharpening through the tears. "He said you knew. For 2 years." I nodded slowly. "He needed a safe place. I provided it. I hope you're not angry with me for keeping his confidence." She shook her head vehemently. No, I'm grateful. God, what if he hadn't had that? I'm so scared, James. I'm scared for my son. I'm scared my husband is going to lose him. I'm trying to understand, but it's like the ground shifted under me. We talked for a long time. I spoke not as an expert, but as a friend who had witnessed Lucas's journey from the shore. I gave her the names of PFLAG and other resources for parents. I told her what I knew of her son's courage, his kindness, his essential Lucas-ness that had not changed, only come into clearer focus. That conversation was a turning point. Sarah became the bridge. She began her own education, her own process of acceptance. Ben remained on his island of anger and confusion for a long, painful time. Lucas moved away for college, his relationship with his mother growing stronger over weekly video calls, his relationship with his father reduced to terse, logistical texts about tuition payments. The story, like all true life stories, doesn't have a neat Hollywood ending. It has a real one. It took Ben nearly 2 years. 2 years of silence from his son, 2 years of watching his wife's quiet grief and growing advocacy, 2 years of sitting alone in a too-quiet house with his unexamined beliefs. Change, for a man like Ben, didn't come from a lightning bolt of understanding, but from the slow, erosive drip of absence, and the dawning, terrifying realization that his pride was costing him his child. He showed up at my door again last fall. He looked older, diminished. He didn't have a six-pack. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, much like his son had years before. "James," he said, his voice rough. How do I start? How do I fix this?" I didn't invite him in. We stood on the porch, the way we had so many times before. "You don't fix him, Ben," I said gently. "You fix your understanding. You start by telling him you love him. You start by saying you're sorry for the pain. You start by listening. And you have to mean it." He nodded, a muscle working in his jaw. "I'm scared." "I know," I said. So was he. I don't know the details of their first conversation, but I know Lucas came home for Thanksgiving this year. I saw them through the window, all three of them, in their kitchen. They weren't laughing or embracing. The body language was careful, tentative. Ben was listening. Lucas was talking. Sarah had a hand on each of them. Progress, not perfection. A family learning a new language, word by painful, precious word. As for me, the neighbor, my role in this true life story has faded, as it should. I am no longer a secret keeper or a safe house. I'm just James Carter again, the guy who listens to weird jazz and has art books. But sometimes, when Lucas visits his parents, he'll come over and we'll have a cup of coffee. He'll tell me about his boyfriend, about his classes, about his life. He is radiant, unburdened, fully himself. That single knock on my door, interrupting a lazy Saturday rest, changed the course of more than one life. It taught me that courage often whispers before it shouts, that being an ally sometimes just means providing a quiet chair and a listening ear, and that the most profound stories of change often begin not with a roar, but with a tremulous, human voice asking, "Can I talk to you?"